Thank you, everyone who joined us today. I will try to be quick. I will try to give a blitz talk on this one. That's a challenge for me. Let's see how it goes. I'm calling that striving in the gap, impact engineering. Somehow it reflects what it's about, and it will be about the concept of the gap, how it can help for you to model the impact, and what tools can we use about that. And probably while reading all of that, you are thinking, how does that relate with testing or quality? So I hope during the talk I will explain myself. So concept of the gap, I found that concept in Simon Sinek's newsletter, and it highly resonated with how I think. So I would like to quote that, because he's saying that playing in the gap means helping something like organization, the team, or I would say even the individual transition from its current state, which is most likely broken in a way, to where they aspire to be. So basically, when you have a good vision, imagination where you want to be, you're probably able to recognize the gap you would like to fulfill. And when you see that gap as a box, there is some questions about how to measure that, how to think about that. And because we like to measure things, we are test engineers, we like metrics and so on. So in science notation, those like closing the gap, they explain that by deltas. Basically, delta means change. If you would like to change something, you imagine like the current state, which is some kind of baseline, and the next thing you want to be, and delta is the gap between those two. So basically, that's the difference you want to make. If you have a big and abstract gap, which was like quality or testing for me, you can break that into components. You can strive to find some structures, and basically, I feel like a lot of us are living with structures. For example, mnemonics, like shaded fix, is a structure to not forget something that's important in there. So that's a tool to help us to remind something that's important and not to miss that gap and then stand and look that, all right, this user is using the software. I'm not thought about that. So, you know, that's closing the gap in a way. But even though you have some metrics and structures and so on, you need to have vision or context in mind, like what is the dream you would like to achieve? What is the end goal where you would like to arrive? So not forgetting that, because sometimes you will be in situations where there will be no metrics to answer your questions, but having a vision in mind, having that end goal will give you the answer straight away, because, you know, having that dream in mind will help you answer a lot of that. And experiment. Do a lot of small experiments, because only by experimenting you will answer that whatever you have in mind works in real life. You need to validate all of those ideas that they are moving towards closing that gap. So this is about me slide. It's sketchy, and it's not the first slide, because when I talk how I developed during my career, actually I was closing the gaps. I was closing the gaps of learning testing, learning test automation, learning performance testing. I feel like a lot of good courses we developed in Saucery Academy was closing the gaps in our company, actually. And we made a pretty good course out of solving that problem. So I feel like closing a lot of gaps throughout my career led to, you know, Debridge, then Cognizant, then starting writing a blog and starting this conference. So, you know, that's how everything relates and finally resulted in who I am today. So it's actually a bit of my personal story in a way. And during that journey, I noticed that sometimes you cannot close the gaps on your own. For example, even if you have good testing or good test automation, that still doesn't mean that you will eventually succeed. It can still be that even with the best practices you know, the team will result in failure, the product will fail because of some other reasons. Because even you do all the things the same as in your previous project, it cannot work in the current context. So recognizing the levels of impact, how it's not only about you, but you should think about how to do impact within the team, within an organization and community. It starts to get not a nice to have, but necessary things to do some impact to some like higher levels. So for example, in my case, I would say that alone in isolation, you cannot have a good quality product working within a team in a silos, like isolated from each other. Collaboration is the key and very necessary. So moving on, I moved into the new role, and new gaps approached me. So gap number one was the lack of role clarity. Surprise, surprise. So everybody said that it's expected. What do you think? Arriving into practice lead position, like probably that's something similar as head of QA. So basically, there's a lot of unclarity there, and you can set the directions based on your feelings or the data or whatever you have. So I'm starting to asking myself, how do I know if I'm successful? And then I broke down that question about the quality delivery within the organization and within a lot of projects we are having in the organization, which is like 40 projects and more. And how do I know that those projects are successful and delivering like high quality delivery? Then how do I know about a single project, whether it's successful? What's the quality for a single project is? And when we talk about being proactive or being preventative, shifting left, not how only I know about that, but how to make the teams know about that and be proactive to spot those gaps themselves. And all right, I started my journey into investigating how to close that kind of gaps, and started with a single product or a single project. So the resource that helped me very much was the Pragmatic Engineer article, because I was firstly in search for some kind of universal metric that will answer my question. So, and there is a lot of metrics, and probably some of the metrics are more useful, some metrics are more like a vanity metrics that shows the busy work and not that much of the value. So the resource I found very useful was the effort output outcome impact model that allowed me to categorize those metrics, those indicators between those categories. So for example, it is very obvious in sales or in recruitment where the number of emails recruiters sent, it's the effort actually, but the impact they are trying to make is to attract talent to the company for the company to succeed in the long run. So basically, and how are you succeeding? It's a lot harder to measure. What's the metric of talent in organization? How do you measure that? So that's a $1 billion question, I would say. Next, I found later on very similar model, but more in terms of software engineering, more in terms of the context we are working on. The Google's theory of quality introduced from their productivity research process, code, system, and product model, which has also 4 parts, which aligns pretty nicely with the previous model. While previous model is like more universal and can be applied to sales and recruitment, as you see, this one is more towards what we do. And you can then probably group like static codec analysis metrics towards like code part, or SLAs to the system part, and then think about product metrics in a way like of North Star, success metrics, and so on. So this is how I thought about that, and this is how I divided those metrics across the metrics axis according to which metrics are closer to the product and which metrics are closer to the process. and which are in between. So I know things are debatable there, like probably some of those metrics like DevX is in the range between system and code, and you know, I'm not that good explaining things, but probably you get the point. And one of the advice is that when you solve the problem, you should start from the right side, from the product side, and answer the question about the product vision, about the product strategy, and what kind of problem you want to solve there, and go to the left. So basically, it's easy to remember. Start right, okay? And this is how my journey proceeded, because I felt like I know the process. I have some experience with processes, like I worked in Agile, I worked with Scrum, with Kanban, etc., etc. I see some code, I do some code reviews, I wrote some code by myself, I know some metrics there. As well, I tested some systems, so I know that thing, but product was a known world for me. So I started studying product. Just to have a better understanding, a better picture to close that gap in the product, because that was my next gap, the product. So this was the book I knew previously about the processes, about testing, written by Janet Gregory and Selena Delis. So probably you know Janet Gregory from that famous Agile testing book that she co-authored together with Lisa Crispin. So this is a very nice resource I strongly recommend. And this is another resource that I found out, and it was released timely early this year by Marty Kagan, like Silicon Valley guru about product stuff. And it explains in pretty nice and understandable terms 20 product principles across product strategy, processes, delivery, discovery, culture, teamwork, etc., etc. So what did I do? I tried to merge those different worlds together. And I merged those by merging different boxes, like 10 categories from one book, 20 principles from other book, across the structure that I had previously between process, code, system, and product. And what I found out early, that fifth part occurred, which is culture. Okay, let's take that for now. After doing some merging, some rearrangement, the model finalized like that. So we have a product where focus is where needed. You need to understand the strategy. You need to understand your problem, what you're solving. You need to be powered by insights. So basically, data should be coming in, and product owners should be disclosing that data to you. So that's transparency. Placing bets, saying no to a lot of things, and understanding that it's betting game, that not everything can succeed. From system and code part, code quality, technical depth, deployment infrastructure, observability, automation, and tools are like key cornerstones, and you can evaluate that separately. Probably I should not go into details there, you know even better than me. Teamwork and processes principles say that outcomes are more important than the effort you are putting in. You need to have sense of ownership to be motivated. You need to experiment, validate what you're doing, check in production, try to collect not only data, but understanding of what you're doing and what's working, what's not. Be empowered with problems to solve. I mean that you should know the context, what you are solving, not set what to do, what kind of solutions is needed, because that does not give understanding about the problem. Collaboration, already called that out. And responsible testing, we will get back to that. From cultural things, principles over process, you should be flexible to change processes based on the principles you are sticking to. Well-being and satisfaction, you should be happy, motivated, because developer experience is based on that, saying that happy developers results in a good quality work. Trust over control, that leaders should lead by context, not by micromanaging, providing that context, providing those insights, providing that transparency. So everything is kind of connected. And I'm trying to run through all of them just to, explain myself a little bit. So instead of a single gap about quality, I now have 20 gaps. So, and that's good. Those gaps are smaller, those gaps are narrower, and I can, focus on them, try to think about some indication, how to measure them, how to talk with teams about them, and identify the problems, if any, identify gaps, or educate teams to talk about that, to think about that on their own, so I'm not needed. I can do more interesting things in life. What's good, that this structure aligns well with DORA capabilities. As well, it aligns well with the model of 3 Ps. So have you know that model of people, process, and product? Have you heard about that? So it's kind of well-known thing how to structure your initiatives when you think about some startup, some company, or whatever. And if you would like to have this in more detail with some more explanations behind that, a lot of that is coming from that product management book, but as well you can have the summary in my personal blog. Or if you are more into testing and more into pyramids, you can have it like that. You can have it like 4-layered structure with the focus on top, because focus is the most important thing. And when I focus, I think about the eye. The eye is on the top of the pyramid, and that reminds me something. So maybe that could be a new world order, I don't know. Okay, let's get more serious. So I feel like it's a good tool, and I'm starting experimenting with that. And what I'm doing is currently 2 ways. First category of experimentation is some kind of surveys. So it can be survey for a project team, it can be surveys for a particular community, but at least that survey is based on some kind of structure, and you are trying to get some kind of indicators that something is not right, and you can get a proactive reminder to go talk about that topic with that particular person. Or you can use that as a retro. So I tried it yesterday. It works. It is welcome as a very different retro that is usual retro, because usually we talk about the processes, about our daily routines, and our daily obstacles, and that's how it goes in retros. So I took that as a retro as a service. When you can invite me, I do an introduction, and we are doing some like thermometer or traffic lights on or something like that. So basically, that is giving me a better understanding of that gap. Maybe it's not based on metrics. Maybe it's based on some kind of feeling, some kind of other indicators. But it's still better than have a black box or a gap in that. All right. I hope I explained a single project level. But what about when you have multiple? So when you have multiple, when you're thinking about organization, I would say you can think in similar terms. You can think about organization as some kind of providing products, providing services, and think in a similar way that similar principles should apply. And there is a saying that when product companies build software, they develop the software in a way that represents the company. So I put that vice versa. I took the software principles, software architecture principles, and tried to explain the company to me. So I built this impact map based on how I see the company's functions interact between each other. So it's nothing that original, because you have sales, you have community, you have innovation and growth, which you probably would find in any kind of consulting organizations that is interesting if attracting talent, attracting new projects, and so on and so forth. But what's different is the strategy behind that, the context behind that. How are you trying to close the gaps in those particular functions? How you try to improve those functions? And that's the questions I have for the owners of those functions. I do not have a good answer, but at least it gives the direction that, okay, I need transparency. I need to be able to see, how those gaps are looking from their perspective, what they are expecting from me, and so on. So it can explain like a big chaotic thing in more in more clear terms. Maybe how different functions depend on each other. Maybe it can help like designing an experiments. For example, if I would like to improve productivity, I would like to improve like innovation and growth. And how can I do that? Maybe by staff engineers, putting some attention to them and what kind of initiatives they are doing in their communities and so on. So, looking into that, I can see like how they are connecting between each other and try to model experiments how to improve things. So yeah, I'm trying to be brief there, but one last thing I would like to talk about is testing, because in that pyramid, testing was mentioned only like as a single block. And if you look into this model from the responsibility standpoint, we are not responsible for all the things. We are not owning all the things. There is like product ownership. Culture is from the research. Culture is mostly dictated like by top to the bottom. So high leadership is setting the culture, and if we need a cultural change, we need to go to talk to leaders and so on and so forth. But basically, responsible testing is something that probably testers are owning. And we can be those ambassadors of quality, those advocates of quality. So my invitation to you, my message to you would be to think about the testing from risks perspective. It's no news. But when you think about risks, we typically think about system and code. Sometimes we think about process and teamwork. Sometimes that's, Scrum Master's role on that, but I also see test engineers as the ones who contribute a lot in retro about the process change and so on. But also I invite you to think about the risks and start seeing risk in product. Start somehow find a ways to evaluate our product strategies and questioning whether we are going the right way. Also, about the culture. Are we living those principles? Are we feeling well? Are we good? Are we having good well-being and satisfaction? Are we able to change processes quickly if that's not reflecting our principles, or do we have enough trust to go up with innovation? Or I don't know. There is a lot of things that can go bad talking about culture, and I'm happy to see that more and more movements are, looking back into culture as the meaningful cornerstone. Like, I was happy to see that in the DevOps conference, like several weeks ago, where they most often start talking less about tools and more about culture, about the key principles, how not to forget them, how to live them, because there is no good answers, there is no right way, but how I'm feeling a lot of times when I talk about, even now standing in front of you and talking about this, I'm probably not the popular guy talking about fancy tools, fancy technology, artificial intelligence, and how it can save a lot of money and change the world. But I'm talking about how we think, and I'm inviting you to challenge your thinking, put more focus on critical thinking, and maybe question yourself if you see that you are thinking similarly as everyone around. Maybe that's not a good way. Maybe that's a good way, but at least stop for a minute and question that. This is it.
Thank you for your presentation. We have some questions. How do you find time during the work to close the gaps if product requires fast delivery and no time to think?
That could be a good thing, because I'm hearing a lot of good things in this question. If that is really required by product, and if product has a clear focus on delivery, if they know the problem and they have a fast way to do that, that's a lot of good indication there. So, there is also a principle of like flow. If the flow is there, then you don't need to do another continuous improvement there, because the goal is not a continuous improvement, but the goal is flow. That's like the main principle of Kaizen, from Japan. So I feel like let's not fix what's not broken.
Okay, thank you. What gap are you tackling right now?
So those two gaps about my role clarity and understanding of quality in the project, in the single project scope, I feel like those are not closed, like in any means, because what I have not mentioned, but what's the reality is, the bigger the role, the slower you get the feedback. The slower you know that the thing that you are solving, the gap you are trying to close, is closing. So if you are able to learn testing, test automation, new programming language pretty fast and see that, okay, test is working, I'm confident because I run mutation tests. So that's not that easy in an organization. Now I'm thinking maybe that can be experiment to have a mutant in organization and see how fast it get killed.
Okay, what is your source of motivation for closing the gaps?
It's interesting. It's interesting work. It's it's rewarding in a very interesting way, because because of that feedback thing. That feedback comes not instantly, but it definitely comes, and in very unexpected places. So the thing I like to do is to, when I get some kind of feedback like that, to stop and celebrate for a bit, internally, inside of me. But yeah, that drives me, and that's how I explain the motivation behind me.
Good. The best one, probably, a question: how much does it cost to have you in our retro?
So if you are the employee of Cognizant, that's for free. If you are externally out of Cognizant, so contact me, my email. You can find me. Yeah.
Your phone number, right somewhere here. Okay, how can you properly measure such overkill process?
Can you repeat?
How can you properly measure such overkill process?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm getting the question.
But it has 8 likes, so probably people.
Probably author is in the room. Can we clarify a bit? I don't know. I don't know what's the overkill process is. It sounds like, when you stuck in the processes, and processes do not allow you to move fast and with confidence. So basically, I feel like those DORA metrics about lead time and change failure rate, those I feel like indicates your confidence in moving fast and with confidence, but only indicates. You need to look into the context and review things closely.
Good. How do you feel? How do you understand or feel that the gap has been filled?
You need to look into context. if you have indicators, some kind of metrics, they can answer you. It can be like team's perception. So basically, if you have some kind of model like this model or another model, and you collect team's opinions about something, so you can do like once to have a baseline, and then you can have a meaningful goal to improve something for a team. So basically, your goal would be that the next time we take that activity, team will be happy with that particular thing, that particular principle, and they will be saying in a way that that problem that we were complaining back then when we were taking the baseline is not existing right now. So that's the vision of the end result. And if you talk about metrics, how to measure that in between, it can be case by case. It can be even sometimes impossible to put that into metrics, into some kind of indicators. But just to have that, some case to fetch teams' perception about that, that could be, that delta, that change you would like to make between the one point in time and another point in time where we want to be.
Okay, thank you. We still have some questions, but we're running out of time, so thank you a lot for your presentation.
Thank you, everyone.